They buried the story. They always do. But some truths cannot be silenced. They rot beneath the earth, waiting for men bold enough to dig them up. In 1853, Kentucky was scarred by a child born without a soul. You were told the horror ended there, that the valley swallowed its secrets and time erased the memory. That is the lie. What followed was not death, it was infection. A curse, one that spread through bloodlines, institutions, and even the very foundations of America itself. You must understand, when a community consecrates emptiness, when men kneel before a hollow vessel and call it sovereign, they are not worshipping a child. They are opening a door. And once opened, doors never truly close. The cult that crowned the Hollow Boy did not vanish with the snows of that winter. It dispersed. Families fled, but they did not flee as survivors. They fled as carriers. Wherever they went, whispers followed. Neighbors spoke of sudden disappearances, of barns painted with strange markings, of children who awoke in the night screaming, of faceless men standing at their windows. Entire counties reported sudden declines in livestock, crops that withered under a sky that seemed unchanged. And at the center of every rumor, the same phrase, the crown of Hollow walks. The journals of the men in black, the so-called observers, were confiscated by higher authorities. Few pages remain, but those that slipped through describe something chilling. The child did not die. He was taken, moved in secret, first to Louisville, then further east. Always under the protection of men in cloaks, always accompanied by experiments too disturbing to recount in full. And wherever he went, accidents followed. A theater fire that killed 200 souls. A mine collapse that swallowed men alive. A sudden fever that wiped out entire households in a single night. Coincidence? That is what they would have you believe, but look closely. Disasters are not random. They are signatures left behind like fingerprints, and the Hollow Child left his prints across the spine of America. The curse was not a haunting, it was a system. Once the vessel was crowned, he became more than a child. He became a template. A model for power without conscience, leadership without empathy. And men in high places understood the value of such a creation. So I ask you, if an entire nation could inherit a curse, how would you know? Would you see it in the ruins of its history, or in the emptiness of its leaders' eyes? The settlers who crowned the Hollow Child did not disappear. They multiplied. Their bloodlines, twisted by devotion and ritual, carried the curse into the wider body of America. Some changed their names, some married into respectable families, and within a single generation, their descendants were no longer farmers or exiles. They were judges, sheriffs, politicians, men in pulpits. The infection had found a new disguise: authority. Records, those that survived the purge, show strange consistencies. Families that once lived in the valley turned up in Kentucky's ledgers with sudden wealth. Land grants awarded mysteriously, fortunes accumulated without explanation. Men with no education stepping into roles of influence as if doors had been unlocked for them. These doors were not opened by merit, they were opened by allegiance. The covenant had not ended, it had expanded. Consider this. In Louisville, a judge presiding over cases of orphaned children was found with sigils carved beneath his desk. In Lexington, a prominent banker's estate included barns painted with the same markings once scrawled in blood in the valley. And in Frankfurt, a senator's son was born with no reflection in his eyes. Neighbors swore they saw nothing but blackness, just like the Hollow Child of 1853. The institutions of America did not resist these families, they absorbed them. The system always hungers for men who can separate power from conscience. That is the essence of control. To create leaders who command not out of principle, but out of void. The curse, then, is not supernatural in the way you imagine. It is systemic. It rewires bloodlines into conduits for control. These descendants became tools for something larger, something that thrives not in darkness alone, but in the machinery of society itself. Their influence spread into churches that demanded obedience without compassion, into courts that delivered judgment without justice, into banks that consumed lives without mercy. This is how curses survive, not as whispers in forests, but as policy, not as ghosts, but as laws. Now ask yourself, how many of the men who shaped the nation were truly human in spirit? And how many were hollow, wearing the mask of humanity while carrying the curse of that valley? You were told America was built on freedom. But tell me, what kind of freedom can exist when the architects themselves were bound to a covenant of emptiness? Curses do not linger only in blood. They embed themselves into structures, into systems. When the descendants of the hollow cult moved into power, they did not just carry the emptiness within them. They encoded it into the very bones of America. Buildings, laws, institutions, each became an extension of the curse. Look at the architecture of the 19th century. Courthouses, churches, and banks rose in sudden abundance, built not only for function, but for domination. Stone pillars like watchful sentinels, windows shaped in symbols older than Christianity. Entrances aligned not with the sun, but with ancient markers known only to the initiated. These were not coincidences. They were blueprints. And the blueprints carried memory. The same sigils once smeared in blood in the Kentucky Valley, now chiseled into marble, hidden in plain sight. Inside those walls, the curse did its work. The courthouse did not offer justice, it offered judgment. The church did not offer salvation, it offered submission. The bank did not offer prosperity, it offered chains. These were not accidents of history. They were deliberate tools of psychological control, designed to hollow men from the inside out, to strip away soul, leaving only obedience. The proof lies in patterns. Every town touched by those families, every county where their influence took root, saw the same transformation. Communities became rigid, hierarchical, obsessed with ritual and fear. Children raised not to question, but to comply. Fathers broken into labor, mothers silenced into obedience. And through it all, the hollow gaze of leadership watched, guiding, not with compassion but with calculation. Here is the forbidden truth. The curse was never meant to remain hidden in the woods. That was only the trial ground. Its true purpose was expansion. To create institutions that replicate the hollow child, not as flesh, but as function. Systems that move without empathy, laws that punish without reason, churches that pray without spirit. And once you understand this, you see it everywhere. The court that silences the innocent while protecting the corrupt. The church that preaches love while demanding blind obedience. The school that rewards memorization but destroys originality. Each is a reflection of the same curse, the same hollow. So I ask you, are you a man shaped by your will, or are you a vessel shaped by their design? Because the curse does not just live in buildings and bloodlines, it lives in you if you submit to it. Blood was only the beginning. The hollow cult discovered quickly that blood fuels fear, but fear alone cannot sustain power. To survive beyond one valley, beyond one generation, they needed a subtler offering, one that every man could give without question. They found it in belief. Think carefully. Blood is limited, costly, and dangerous to spill in the open. But belief? Belief is endless. It flows not from veins, but from minds. And once belief is harvested, it binds more tightly than chains. The settlers in 1853 sacrificed their children to the hollow child. But their descendants? They learned that people would sacrifice themselves if they were convinced it was holy, patriotic or righteous. Institutions became temples for this new ritual. The church demanded tithes, obedience and silence in exchange for promises of salvation. The state demanded loyalty, taxes, and the willingness to die in wars that enriched only the elite. The banks demanded submission to debt, a burden so heavy it reshaped a man's life into servitude. And through it all, belief was the true currency. Belief that obedience would buy you heaven. Belief that war would make you free. Belief that debt was a moral duty. Every structure of control is nothing without belief. And once belief is weaponized, men willingly pour themselves into the hollow. Do you see the genius of the curse? In the valley, it took knives and rituals to hollow men. But in the cities and towns that followed, it took nothing but words. Pulpits and podiums became altars. Ledgers and laws became sacred scrolls. And men bowed willingly, convinced they were free even as the hollow consumed them. This is why you are surrounded by symbols. Look at the dollar bill, the courthouse seal, the flag waving in the wind. You are not seeing symbols of freedom. You are seeing sigils of the hollow, marks that train you to give belief, not question it. And here lies the most dangerous truth. Belief is not neutral. Every prayer, every pledge, every oath is an offering. You think it disappears into air, but it is collected, directed, fed into a system older than the nation itself. So I ask you now, who receives your belief? Do you give it to yourself, or do you pour it, drop by drop, into the hollow? The curse understood something long before the public ever did. If you control the child, you control the man. That is why education was never truly designed to liberate. It was engineered to hollow, to strip away the dangerous parts of the mind, the imagination, the instinct to rebel, and replace them with obedience, repetition, and silence. In the valley of 1853, the settlers carved symbols into barns and bodies. Their descendants carved something else: schoolhouses, rows of desks, bells that dictated when a child may speak, when he may rise, when he may eat. Do you see the pattern? It was the same ritual, hidden in plain sight. Discipline not for wisdom but for submission. Structure not for knowledge but for conformity. The curriculum was never neutral. Children were not taught how to think, but what to think. History was rewritten, heroes manufactured, myths of freedom drilled into young minds while the true chains were hidden. The hollow requires this, because a man who questions is a threat, but a man who memorizes is a vessel. Think of the pledge recited daily in classrooms, words spoken in unison, hand over heart, eyes forward. It is not education, it is liturgy, a mass ritual disguised as patriotism. Do you believe this was for love of country? No. It was for love of control. Because once a child learns to speak oaths without question, he will carry that obedience into every corner of his life. And when obedience replaces thought, the hollow thrives. The boy becomes a soldier. The girl becomes a servant. The dreamer becomes an accountant of chains. The system does not need your creativity, your soul, your fire. It only needs your compliance. Here is the hidden history they never told you. The earliest public schools in America were modeled after Prussian systems designed not to produce geniuses, but to produce soldiers who obey orders without hesitation. That model was imported, expanded, and sanctified. And over time, it became the backbone of American education. So understand this. The hollow does not just live in leaders and institutions, it lives in the classroom, in the very first lessons etched into your mind. It does not need to kill rebellion in adulthood, because it has already starved it in childhood, and yet even here, there is choice. You can unlearn, you can rewire, You can reclaim, but only if you first admit the truth. The schools you trusted were not temples of knowledge. They were laboratories of obedience. War is the grand altar of the hollow. What began as whispered chants in the woods of Kentucky became cannon fire, bayonets, and battlefields soaked with the blood of men who never knew what they were truly dying for. The curse feeds on obedience, and nothing harvests obedience more efficiently than war. Think of it. A boy raised in the schools of control, drilled in pledges and rituals, grows into a man. And when the drums of war sound, he does not question. He marches, he bleeds, he dies, not for freedom, not for family, but for men whose names he will never know. Men who carry the curse, men who direct the machine. The Civil War erupted barely, a decade after the Hollow Child was crowned. Was it coincidence, or was it inevitable? A nation divided, brother against brother, blood poured not only into soil, but into the system itself. 500,000 men gone, sacrifices on an altar disguised as patriotism. And who profited? The bankers who lent money, the politicians who consolidated power, the industries that thrived on blood. The hollow grew fat on corpses, and it never stopped. Every generation since has been offered to the altar. The Great War, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, endless conflicts, where ordinary men, dreamers, fathers, sons, were emptied of life and filled the vessel of empire. They called it duty, they called it honor, but strip away the banners and what remains? Sacrifice demanded by the hollow. Understand this. War is not chaos. It is order. It is orchestrated suffering engineered for harvest. The deaths of millions are not failures. They are fuel. And each war deepens the curse, teaching the next generation that dying for masters is the highest virtue a man can achieve. But what they never tell you is this. War is not just about killing bodies. It is about breaking spirits. The soldier who survives returns hollowed, obedient, dependent on the very institutions that destroyed him. And thus, the cycle repeats, generation after generation. So I ask you, whose war are you really fighting? When you wave the flag, when you bow your head, when you accept the story handed to you, are you honoring your people or feeding the hollow that has haunted this land since 1853? The curse does not hunger for victory. It hungers for sacrifice. And war is the endless feast. Not every sacrifice requires a battlefield. Some are carried out in silence day after day, without bloodshed, yet with the same result. Men hollowed out, lives consumed. The curse is clever. It learned that war was not the only altar. Debt could achieve the same outcome without a single musket fired. In the valley of 1853, blood was poured into the hollow vessel. Today, it is dollars. Money is not paper. It is belief crystallized. A promise, a chain, a tool. And debt is the most refined form of sacrifice because it bleeds you. Slowly, invisibly, while convincing you it is your duty. The banks knew this. They were the first to weaponize the curse in plain sight. They made borrowing holy. They painted debt as opportunity, progress, even patriotism. They built temples with columns like churches and demanded offerings not in blood, but in interest. And men obeyed. They signed contracts, not realizing each signature was a covenant, another link in the chain binding their lives to the hollow. Think about it. A man shackled to debt will wake before dawn, labor until night, and still believe. He is free. He will pass this burden to his children, who will inherit not land or wealth, but obligation. This is the brilliance of the curse. It no longer needs to kill you quickly. It can drain you across decades, and you will thank it for the privilege. Look at America after the Civil War. The country was rebuilt not on freedom, but on bonds and loans. Entire states mortgaged, entire industries enslaved. The curse had found its perfect fuel. Belief turned into debt. Debt turned into obedience. And what of today? You are told that to have a home, you must be in debt. To have an education, you must be in debt. To have health, you must be in debt. Your life is financed by the hollow, and every payment you make is another offering to the system born in that cursed valley. But here is the most chilling truth. Debt does not bind money. It binds time. Every dollar owed is an hour of your life, promised to the hollow. And once your time is consumed, what remains of you? Nothing but emptiness. So I ask you, are you living your life, or are you renting it piece by piece to a system designed to keep you hollow? The curse is patient. It adapts. Once it hollowed men with blood, then with war, then with debt. But the modern age gave it a new weapon, one sharper, subtler, and far more invasive than any blade: surveillance. Understand this: to rule a man, you must know him, his fears, his habits, his weaknesses. In the valley of 1853, the strangers in black wrote endlessly in their journals, observing every detail of the cult, every reaction, every ritual. Those journals were not forgotten. They were blueprint. The lesson learned was clear. Power does not come from commanding men. It comes from recording them, predicting them, shaping them before they even realize they are being shaped. And so, surveillance became the new altar. Census rolls, birth registries, tax records, each a tether, binding the individual into the system. Later came the fingerprint, the photograph, the dossier. And today, cameras on every street, screens in every hand, every word typed, every step tracked, every purchase logged. The curse has grown eyes, millions of them. But here is what most fail to see. Surveillance is not passive. It is not about watching, it is about shaping. When you know a man's desires, you can feed them to him like bait. When you know his fears, you can control him with shadows. Entire populations can be guided, nudged, and hollowed without ever realizing they have been moved, and all of it is justified. For your safety, for your freedom. The same words spoken by preachers and kings now whispered by screens and machines. And like the settlers who knelt before the hollow child, people bow willingly, offering up their privacy, their secrets, their very identities, believing it is for their own good. Here is the darkest truth. Surveillance is ritual. Every login, every scan, every approval is an offering. You do not give blood anymore, you give data, and data is belief, codified. It tells the system who you are, what you crave, what you fear. And once the system knows that, it owns you. So, ask yourself, are you truly free when your every thought is anticipated? Or are you simply living in a cage so vast you can no longer see the bars? The curse has evolved. It no longer needs to threaten you. It only needs to watch you, until you begin watching yourself. There comes a moment in every descent when the truth can no longer be observed from a distance. It must be confronted. You have followed me this far, deeper into the corridors of forbidden history. You have seen how the curse began with blood, then spread into war, debt, and surveillance. But now I ask you a question no man can ignore. Where does the hollow end? And where do you begin? This is not just history. This is inheritance. The same systems that hollowed the settlers in 1853 are still hollowing you, draining your time, your strength, your belief. You can deny it, but denial does not break chains. Only recognition does, and recognition demands action. So I will give you a choice. You can continue listening as a spectator, entertained by dark history untouched by its teeth. Or you can mark yourself. You can claim an identity that the hollow cannot consume. This is not for me. It is for you. Type these words into the comments below twice as a seal upon yourself. I carry fire, not hollow. Do it once, and the algorithm will see you. Do it twice, and you will see yourself. It is symbolic, yes, but symbols matter. The hollow has always thrived on symbols. Sigils, pledges, oaths, this is yours, a refusal, a defiance. A statement that you will not be emptied by their systems. Understand, this is dangerous knowledge. Once you say it, you cannot go back to the comfort of ignorance. You cannot unsee the chains. You will begin to notice them everywhere. In the eye, rituals you perform without thinking, in the debts you carry like invisible shackles, in the way you censor your own thoughts before speaking them aloud. That awareness is the fire, and fire spreads. But remember this as well. Fire terrifies the hollow, because the hollow cannot create, it can only consume. Fire, on the other hand, transforms. It destroys, yes, but it also purifies. And if enough men carry fire instead of emptiness, the curse loses its grip. So I ask you again, will you remain a vessel, or will you carry fire? The choice is yours. Make it now. Religion, the oldest throne of power, and perhaps the most effective. For centuries, men believed faith was a bridge to the divine. But in the hands of the hollow, faith became something else entirely, a system of control, engineered to strip men of their fire and replace it with obedience. Consider the settlers of 1853 Kentucky. When the hollow child was born, the preachers did not denounce it. They did not protect the people from its emptiness. No, they sanctified it. They wrapped it in scripture, cloaked it in ritual, declared its presence to be God's will. In truth, they knew what they were doing, channeling fear into worship. They gave the hollow a pulpit. And once the hollow stood on holy ground, no man dared oppose it. This was the template. Religion, when corrupted, is not about saving souls. It is about harvesting them. Every hymn sung, every confession spoken, every tithe offered becomes a transaction. You are told that salvation must be mediated, that you cannot stand before God without the institution as your gatekeeper. That belief is the lock, the church is the key, and the hollow owns the key. Ask yourself, how many wars were justified by Scripture? How many kings crowned themselves by divine right? How many men bled on battlefields not for freedom, but for dogma? Faith in its pure form should liberate. But corrupted faith enslaves. It convinces men that their suffering is holy, that their chains are sacred, that obedience is salvation. And the more they suffer, the more they are told they will be rewarded in another life. It is the perfect system. A man can spend his entire life hollowed out, drained of his strength, yet he will thank the very hand that consumed him, believing. His emptiness is virtue. This is not accident, this is design. The curse knows that fear of death is the most powerful weapon of all, and so it weaponized heaven. It weaponized hell. But here is the forbidden truth. The hollow does not fear your prayers. It fears your awakening. The moment you realize that no priest, no bishop, no institution can mediate the fire within you, the moment you recognize that divinity does not sit in a cathedral but burns in your chest, the chains break, and that is why they fear knowledge like this. Because once men carry fire, not hollow, their obedience dies. Politics, the stage where the hollow parades itself as savior. You are told that governments are born to serve the people. But history whispers. Another truth, governments serve the curse. From the moment kings declared their bloodlines divine, to the instant presidents swore their oaths on holy texts, politics has always been theater, designed to cloak control in the illusion of choice. Think back to the settlers of 1853. When the hollow child was born, leaders did not resist, they aligned. Magistrates, judges, even militia captains all bent their decisions around the cult's growing shadow. not out of ignorance but calculation. They saw the curse as an opportunity, a power that could bend populations, and they wanted a share. That instinct never died. It became the very skeleton of political power. Every vote you cast is framed as freedom. But ask yourself, do you truly choose, or are you merely selecting between two faces of the same hollow? Every party needs opposition, every speech needs an enemy, every election needs a spectacle. It is ritual, not governance, a ritual of division. Because division hollows nations the way fear hollows men. Keep the people split, and they will never unite against the system itself. And behind the faces, behind the promises, lies the true machinery. The advisors, the financiers, the architects, who never appear on stage but always whisper in ears. These are not politicians, these are priests of the curse, ensuring its rituals are maintained, wars declared, debts expanded, freedoms exchanged for security. They do not serve nations, they serve continuity. Why do you think every empire collapses? The same way. Bread and circuses in Rome, propaganda in modern democracies. It is the same hollow formula. Keep the people entertained, distracted, divided. Drain them while convincing them they are free. Then, when the hollow has consumed enough, let the empire collapse. Out of its ruins, build another. Different face. Same emptiness, and here is the secret they never want spoken. Laws are not written to protect you. They are written to preserve the system that feeds on you. The hollow does not fear crime, it fears rebellion, it fears fire. So I ask you, when you look at your leaders, do you see men of vision or vessels of the hollow wearing the mask of authority? Education, the crown jewel of the hollow's empire. The most dangerous weapon is not the sword, nor the gun, nor the debt ledger. It is the shaping of the mind before it ever learns to resist. If politics is the theater of obedience, education is its rehearsal. Remember the settlers of 1853 Kentucky. When the hollow child arrived, the cult did not waste time on adults alone. They turned to the young. They gathered children in circles, whispering prayers and chants, drilling them in rituals before they even understood the words. By the time those children grew into men, the curse had already carved itself into their bones. No chains required. No blood spilled. They were hollow from the start. The institutions that rose after this followed the same model. Schools became temples of control, cloaked in the language of enlightenment. But look closer. Do they teach men to think or to obey? Do they teach fire or conformity? Notice how history is rewritten, truths erased, questions discouraged. Notice how curiosity is punished while memorization is rewarded. That is not education, that is conditioning. The system knows this. If you can hollow a child, you never need to hollow the man. Generations can be guided without rebellion, because rebellion has been trained out of them before it could ignite. They are taught to follow bells, sit in rows, recite words, accept authority. They are not taught sovereignty. They are not taught fire. And when these hollowed children grow into adults, they become the perfect vessels for the other systems: debt, politics, religion, surveillance. They accept them without question, because questioning was never allowed. The curse does not need to fight them. It has already won. Think of it. How many men leave school full of questions about life, power, history, and the self, only to discover those questions were never answered because they were never meant to be asked. Instead, they are handed tools for labor, not tools for freedom. They are prepared not to rule, but to serve. That is the hollow's masterpiece. A society where men believe they are educated, yet remain blind to the chains wrapped around them. But if you are listening now, it means the conditioning failed in you. A spark survived. a fire resisted. And that is why this knowledge feels both dangerous and familiar, because deep down, you always knew something was wrong. Medicine, the one domain where trust runs deepest, where men hand over not just their bodies, but their very survival. And yet here too the hollow found a throne. What should have been a sacred art of healing became another altar of control, another system to hollow men out slowly, all while convincing them they were being saved. Return for a moment to Kentucky, 1853. The settlers called upon doctors to examine the hollow child. What they found terrified them. No pulse, yet it moved. No breath, yet it wailed. Some whispered it was proof that the body is nothing without the soul. Others whispered something darker, that medicine itself would never conquer what was born hollow. The physicians who lingered near the child were not the same afterward. They became fanatics. They began experimenting on the villagers, draining blood, applying poisons, insisting the body could be reset if only enough suffering was endured. The curse had found its way into healing. That same principle echoes today. Modern medicine claims to cure, but look closely. Does it cure or does it bind? For every pill there is a dependency, for every treatment a side effect, for every disease managed, a patient tethered to the system for life. Healing is not the goal, maintenance is. Perpetual treatment, perpetual reliance, perpetual hollowing, and the fear of death, the most ancient fear of all, fuels it. Men are told to obey the white coat as once they obeyed the priest. They are promised salvation, not in the afterlife, but in the next prescription. They are not healed, they are managed, they are catalogued, they are drained. Consider this: the pharmaceutical empires do not profit from health. They profit from sickness prolonged. They profit from dependency. And dependency is the essence of the curse. The body becomes the contract. The man becomes the offering. Even hospitals resemble temples, sterile white walls, rituals of forms and consents, the authority of a priesthood that speaks in tongues of Latin and science. And behind the rituals lies the same unspoken rule: submit. Do not question. Trust the system with your life and accept whatever emptiness it leaves behind. But the fire in you already knows. Healing does not mean dependence. Healing means sovereignty. Your body is not their altar. It is your vessel, and if you carry fire instead of hollow, even sickness itself becomes another illusion shattered. Commerce, industry. The hollow found its greatest expansion in men's ambition. Blood, war, belief, debt, surveillance, religion, education, medicine, all were steps leading to this apex. The factories, the banks, the trade networks, they are not neutral, they are altars. And the workers, the consumers, the dreamers, they are offerings. By the late 19th century, descendants of the hollow cult had infiltrated mercantile centers. They did not seek to destroy, they sought control. Markets, they discovered, could hollow men without a single drop of blood. The promise of wealth, opportunity and advancement becomes the most subtle of chains. A man will trade his freedom for status, his time for a title, his soul for recognition. And he will believe he is ascending even as he descends. Factories, mills and offices were built as temples of efficiency. Bells dictated the rhythm of life, schedules enforced submission, and quotas measured obedience. Laborers did not question because questioning meant falling behind, and those who excelled were not celebrated. They were harvested, their skills redirected, their innovations commodified, their ambition funneled to serve the system. Creativity became product, fire became currency, and every step was orchestrated to strengthen the hollow. Consider advertising, the subtle magician of the industrial age. Desire becomes obedience, need becomes ritual. The man buying, selling, consuming believes he acts freely, yet every choice has been shaped, predicted, anticipated. And the hollow drinks it all. Every purchase, every ambition, every consumed product is fuel. The system does not serve humanity, it harvests it. Even today, this is the curse in motion. Technology and commerce converge to shape behavior, guide attention, and manipulate belief. Every app, every transaction, every notification is part of the same pattern first perfected in Kentucky. Command the mind, harvest the offering, hollow the vessel. And the most insidious part? The men themselves do not see the trap. They believe they are achieving, conquering, mastering life. But the hollow does not need to force them. It thrives in voluntary submission. It learned long ago, a willing vessel is far more valuable than one chained by force. So I ask you, when you chase success, are you really claiming your fire, or are you fueling the hollow? Because ambition without awareness is just another altar. Culture, art, music, storytelling. The hollow is patient enough to wait centuries, but it is cunning enough to twist even beauty into chains. What begins as expression becomes instruction. What begins as inspiration becomes obedience. And every generation is unknowingly hollowed before it can even recognize the trap. From the earliest folk songs sung in the hills of Kentucky to the literature and theater of the cities that followed, the hollow found a voice that could bypass reason and speak directly to the soul. Songs of heroism taught men to emulate obedience. Tales of villainy taught them whom to fear. Theater, literature, and later, film, taught repetition of values, repetition of hierarchy, repetition of belief. Every story a ritual, every hero a model, every villain a warning. Obey, fear, kneel, even music was weaponized. Rhythms and chants designed to evoke compliance, melody structured to comfort while reinforcing hierarchy. The hollow discovered that emotion is an amplifier of control. A man moved to tears or ecstasy by art is a man whose mind is opened, ready to be guided, ready to be shaped, ready to submit. Consider today's culture, streaming, gaming, social media. Every image, every narrative, every trend, every meme is curated to shape desire, dictate values, and guide thought. You believe you are choosing freely what to watch, what to listen to, what to admire. But in truth, your selections are fed to you to train you. Your passion, your anger, your laughter, they are harvested offerings, and it is in culture that the hollow becomes invisible. Because blood is shocking, war is painful, debt is felt. But art convinces you to love your chains. It seduces, it entertains. It distracts. It instructs without seeming to instruct. Now, halfway through our journey, I ask you to mark yourself again. Comment the phrase, "I carry fire, not hollow," twice below. Once to acknowledge the chains you have seen, twice to declare your resistance. Let this ritual lock the transformation. Only through recognition can the hollow be denied its fuel. Curse does not stop with institutions or politics. It is embedded in the stories you consume, in the melodies that stir you, in the culture that shapes your sense of right, wrong, and possible. And every unexamined pleasure is another brick in its altar. Now we arrive at the edge. The hollow's empire spans centuries, continents, bloodlines, institutions, and culture itself. It has turned obedience into ritual, fear into worship, belief into currency. And yet, here you stand, fire in your chest, seeing the chains for what they are. This is the culmination, not the end, but the awakening. The overarching truth of the hollow curse is simple, yet terrifying. It thrives wherever men surrender without awareness. It does not need armies, laws, or technology. It only needs willing vessels. Every system you've seen, religion, education, commerce, war, medicine, politics, culture, is nothing but a channel to hollow men, to shape them into obedient vessels. Its power is not mystical. Its power is psychological, institutional, structural. It is real, and it is everywhere. But here is the forbidden knowledge most will never admit. The hollow is not invincible. Fire can survive it. Awareness can resist it. One man, fully conscious, fully alive, refusing to kneel or submit to invisible masters, begins a contagion the hollow cannot stop. One spark of sovereignty challenges centuries of programmed obedience. One man who sees, refuses, and acts is more dangerous than armies, laws, or machines. That is why this knowledge is dangerous. Once you understand the hollow, you cannot forget it. You cannot unsee the chains. But once you embrace fire instead of hollow, you cannot be consumed by them either. This is why I have asked you to mark yourself with your symbolic phrase. You are no longer a passive vessel. You are a man awake, a man aware, a man armed. And this is where the real battle begins. Not against the hollow itself, which is vast, silent, patient, but against submission within yourself. The world will offer distractions, authority, rituals, and comforts designed to reclaim your fire. You must resist. Every time you choose autonomy, every time you refuse blind obedience, every time you reclaim your time, your belief, your body, your mind, you strike a blow against the hollow. The Valley of Kentucky in 1853 was only the beginning. Its shadow stretches into every institution, every system, every part of modern life. But fire is contagious. Awareness is contagious. And a man who refuses to be hollowed can, in turn, inspire others to awaken. Remember this: the hollow feeds on compliance, thrives on distraction, grows through unawareness. But fire, once kindled, cannot be extinguished by law, ritual, debt, or fear. It spreads, it consumes only falsehood, and it liberates. Now rise, carry fire, not hollow. The curse is vast, but your awakening is vaster. The world is waiting, and your sovereignty begins here.